I'm not in the business of headsets. I'm in the business of camouflage and freedom, right? It's the thing, the device that I offer people allows them to work anywhere these days, and that's a big part of how hybrid work culture has become. Jabra is about a 150-year-old company based near Copenhagen, Denmark. Um, Back in 1869, they ran the first copper between Europe and China to run the telegraph, and that was really the first European internet at the time. Some of the things that we're doing with our devices is we're trying to save in handle time and increase FCR by letting you actually see our devices. That's something that people really don't get these days. We ran out of headsets by the millions per SKU during the COVID kind of pandemic times because people found out that they had to go home and we just couldn't produce enough. In the future, when AI takes all the easy stuff, it's going to leave video as a differentiator for the contact center agent. And I truly believe that that's going to be part of the cockpit of the future.
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to First Contact Stories of the Call Center, the podcast that uncovers the unexpected journeys and the powerful insights of the people shaping the contact center and customer experience world. Today's guest is someone who truly has lived at the crossroads of technology and human connection. Vern Fernandez has over 20 years helping organizations help deliver smarter and more human customer interactions. As a leader in voice and networking solutions, and now been driving leadership at Jabra, Vern's work goes beyond just headsets. He's reimagining how AI, analytics, and digital devices can elevate both agent experiences and customer outcomes. Vern, welcome to the show. Excited to have you here.
Christian, really honored to be here. Thanks for the time in my unexpected journey meeting with you.
Talking about unexpected journeys, right? We talk about the origin stories of a lot of us who now have been some time in the space and go, yeah, when I grew up, that wasn't what I was thinking I was going to do, right? None of us sit back and go, yeah, I'm going to be in the contact center space or the customer experience space. So you have to have a story of how you got here. How did you get through your career journey to where you are today?
It's interesting. I initially went to school and got a master's degree in education. So, and I was going to be in student affairs, being in housing and working at colleges for a while. And then I ended up moving off campus because I had my third child and I went towards the first tech sales job that I went to. And Plantronics happened to be in my town of Santa Cruz, California, which is, a headset manufacturer as well. And that's how I got in, like in 2003. And I've been here since 21 years selling headsets somehow in the market. And you know, I didn't grow up to be this and wanted to be this, but I love it because it's a people helping people business. And there's something really noble about that. And I realized that early in my career that we're helping people to communicate better. And, my path has kind of taken me along that way from sales rep to global account manager to now I manage our alliances here at Jabra, especially around the contact center. So I've been in contact centers for 21 years now.
Yeah, it's interesting how a lot of people fall into this space, right? There's always that job because of something that goes on that says, hey, I need to make some money. It's my first job. It's a career opportunity. And then all of a sudden, there's this concept, right, around the contact center space, whether you're in the contact center within an organization, a BPO outsourcer, or you're in one of the many tech businesses, right, that help those companies and others facilitate their success, that when we find a role and leaders and people around us or a culture that helps us feel like, hey, there's this next step, there's this opportunity. What have you seen when you've gone through that journey that has said, hey, this may have been unexpected, but it feels like home to you, right? What gave you that feeling of like, I can build a career here? Was there something that happened or an experience you received throughout that time that said, this could be a career?
When you're in the headset business like I am, the minute you offer one of these to somebody and they put it on their head, there's kind of a light bulb that goes off in terms of, wow, this really kind of changed how I work. So in a way, I get to be Santa Claus every day, and I realize that I can, let people try my devices out, let it change their life, let it change the way that they work, let it change their business as well. And now more and more, it's. I often tell people I don't really, I'm not in the business of headsets. I'm in the business of camouflage and freedom, right? It's the thing, the device that I offer people allows them to work anywhere these days, and that's a big part of how hybrid work culture has become. And so I've really attached this device that I'm wearing on my head right now to um, letting us work however we want to, and there's a certain freedom in that. So there's some real good values that I really attest to what I'm doing these days. And it's more than just a device, way more than a device to me.
With that being said, I'm sure there's a lot of people that know Jabra as a brand, and they may even just know it as the headset company, right?
Right.
But can you describe, for those that may not know or fully only know the superficial aspects of the business, what is the mission today? How is this company shaping the future of not only the customer and agent experience, but in the overall space of the contact center industry?
Yeah, so for those of you who don't know Jabra, Jabra is about a 150-year-old company based near Copenhagen, Denmark. Um, Back in 1869, they ran the first copper between Europe and China to run the telegraph, and that was really the first European internet at the time. And since then, big part of inventing Bluetooth. Bluetooth was a Danish king, and all the way through all these communication kind of technologies, we have created headsets along the way. And not only headsets, but we're also a major player in the hearing aid area space for health as well. So if you can imagine all the little electronics in a hearing aid going into a headset to make things sound great, those are technologies that we share. And we also do video devices as well. So the camera that I'm using is something that Jabra produces as well, and it's part of the endpoint, that we feel like agents will be using in the future more and more, right? Just to distinguish one service versus another within the market as AI kind of takes the easy stuff, right? We also play in the market of tone-based sentiment analysis as well. So we're taking a look at sentiment, but we're looking at just pure sentiment without the use of speech and text, to be able to pull out that sentiment as well, and understand tone and empathy and things like that. So we're really developing a lot of things that allow agents to succeed at what they do, for the IT groups behind them to understand quality from our devices, and then to understand kind of what the conversation looks like in general. This is one of the very few places where flesh and blood meets, between businesses and customers these days. And we want to take care of those connections.
It's interesting how, humans in many ways adapt, and we also get complacent, and we just deal with things that may not be of optimum performance. And when it comes to things like a headset, right? And many times it's like, well, it's an afterthought. It's this thing that just I have, but I need to make sure I have the right software. I need to have the right overall hardware for security purposes or for scaling my business and things of that nature. But you talked about hearing, right? And the odd thing about hearing is, over time it can degrade and you don't really notice it as well. It's not like it's
Yeah.
night and day where you just lose it unless there's a situation that happens. But over time with that degradation, your new normal is just your new normal. And until you now have this version of hearing that is presented to you that is something that you have forgotten or didn't realize existed anymore for you, it's like literally a life changer for you. And so when it comes to the devices, when you go from just something that works to realizing that the noise around you, your ability to hear someone properly, their ability to hear you, reliability and all those things, forget the brand for a minute. It's just that concept where you're talking about where the human to human is connecting in this virtual world. The difference that you see between those things can make a big difference. And now, with that being said, there has been a really big, deep involvement between Jabra and enhancing customer and agent experiences from the perspective of being able to influence metrics like average handle time and first contact resolution. Can you kind of get some insight and walk us through some specific ways that your partnerships and CX teams are actually impacting those areas?
Yeah, we for a long time, you're exactly right. We were focused on two people talking to each other and hearing. So the two stakeholders involved were the agent and the customer. And we now realize that it's not just the agent and customer anymore. It's also the bot, the AI bot, trying to pull data from our conversation, Christian, and be able to light that up on a dashboard, whether it be speech analytics, agent assist, or translation, things like that. ChatGPT, AI companion, Copilot, whatever. And some of the things that we're doing with our devices is We're trying to save in handle time and increase FCR by letting you actually see our devices. That's something that people really don't get these days. We innovated in around 2018 to put some chipsets inside some of our contact center headsets so that you can see if my microphone is working, to see if my speaker is working, to see if my boom is in the right position. Because if I move it just a little softer and I get a little bit louder, these are noise cancellation things that add to handle that add to kind of like making a better call and lowering handle time. We also have sensors in there that tell you the decibel levels inside, right? And it also tells you if you're using a wireless headset, if you walk too far away from your device and your laptop, because that can create packet loss, right? So where did that packet loss happen? Did it happen at the headset level? Did it happen somewhere else? Are things to be able to see? Things like decibel levels in our devices. If your dog starts barking at home, we can sense when the dog starts barking, but we also know that our headsets can handle that in terms of noise cancellation. So now we can create little real-time widgets for the agent to say, you know what, the headset hears that it's loud, but don't worry about that sound. Meaning don't mute, you don't have to apologize for that noise, and you don't have to repeat yourself for 10 seconds. So automatically, by letting the agent know that the headset's working for them, we're able to save time just with that. And that's an ROI that we can now start to prove out with telemetry. So we offer this data to anybody who wants to consume it. So we have the Nectars and the Versailles and the Operatas and the ServiceNows and Salesforces of the world right now, and Verents of the world, basically consuming that data so that we can light our stuff up on a dashboard for quality monitoring and managed services. So very simple.
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned just a little while ago around AI. We'll definitely have a deeper discussion around AI, but when it comes to use cases where you're going through Jabra's digital devices and alliances, can you share some sort of like initiative or project of where this fusion of AI and hardware have made a tangible impact actually in the contact center performance?
Yeah, I can. I'll give you two examples here. Is one, we have a customer who outsourced about 40,000 agents to BPOs, about 200 sites all over the world, 21 different BPOs. They were having noise issues around the world, and because my headset was offering decibels, they could heat map their entire contact center, BPOs included, and they were able to essentially use information from our devices to help determine where they want to do more business with in terms of sites, right? That's valuable information coming from our devices that allows the customer to have some information about how well the voice of the brand sounds. That's one good example that I have. Another example that I have is that we have a tool called Engage AI where we kind of measure tone of voice. So the ability to measure tone of voice for 100% of the calls allows us to not only understand things like empathy or whether or not an agent's getting yelled at, it also allows us to kind of tackle some issues that speech analytics has out there, mainly around multiple languages and dictionaries, right? If I switch from French to English or Spanish to English, that sometimes confuses the bots today. And sometimes it doesn't always get it right. So we're able to take a look at tone and be able to work with customers on actually giving you a real feel of that conversation. So that's a little bit different in terms of our approach to AI when it comes to tone, is dealing with language issues as an example, right?
Yeah, it's incredible when we talk about the concepts of AI, and we'll talk about that shortly, where there's a lot of misinterpretation where AI can mean a lot of different things. But
Right.
park that for just a minute and let's kind of focus on that topic you were talking about, that dog barking or that noise in the background or something happening. You know, during the pandemic, for those that weren't working remote, everyone abruptly was working remote. And then
Right.
nowadays you have environments where there is full remote, there is back in office, and there's also this hybrid environment. And that's not anything new per se, but it probably has taught a lot of companies, and we've talked to a lot of experts over the years of how they had learning lessons around when they went remote, when they live now in a hybrid environment, how the actual environment they're in, taking, making, receiving calls, and any other media they're managing, can be impacted by their environment, conducive or not for the work. And so what kind of challenges did you see were happening during these shifts, and then especially around engagement and monitoring of those agents when they are remote? How did you see from your perspective that shift, and whether or not there was anything that has changed, reshaped around that experience?
Yeah, I would say that I'll speak from kind of an agent's level and a supervisor level from what we've seen too, right? So from an agent level, it was a huge shift. We ran out of headsets by the millions per SKU during the COVID kind of pandemic times because people found out that they had to go home and we just couldn't produce enough. And we had to keep people in our own factories despite the pandemic just to make them. Um, but we pieced everything together to get them solutions at the time. Agents had to kind of adjust because they're coming from brick and mortar environments, many of them where you had cheerleaders, you had supervisors being able to help them out to see when they were active, when they were not in queue, off queue, when they needed help, when they got it yelled at and things like that. I think a lot of them lost that visibility with their supervisors, and from the supervisors we've spoken to, they lost that ability to really motivate their agents while at home, right? And so and figure out what the metrics were and how to support them best. I think those human things really suffered during the pandemic. And where we really kind of came in was to provide a device that allowed them to deal with the barking dogs, the crying babies. Or in some cases, they were in a one bedroom apartment and they shared that with another person working from home. So you had noise from another person working there in a small space, right? So being able to, and right now what's happening is that we're feeling the effects of that. There are a lot of people that bought cheaper headsets that didn't cancel the noise, and they're now trying to replace those headsets because they're infusing more AI into the mix where voice data matters, right? And kids and dogs and babies don't really create the best data when it comes through on my microphone here, especially when I've invested in all these licenses for all that, right? So those are some of the things that we kind of saw happen through the pandemic, a big rush of devices. And then now kind of the cleanup on the back end is where we're at right now, is we really need a quality device now. We can't deal with this $30 headset that we got off online that doesn't work because that $30 headset is now coming back into the contact center and it's loud again because people are coming back in.
This is James. James is a contact center manager with a passion for philosophy and hiking. As a kid, he made a promise to himself that he would always follow his passion. Today, he ponders on the thought that this promise is probably the best decision he ever made. Today, James loves his job just as much as he loves hiking. So much that he sometimes brings the scent of fresh pine and the tranquility of the mountain streams back to the office with him. With Nobel Biz as his company's provider, James found the necessary peace of mind to finally bridge the gap between his passion and his work. By choosing to partner with the promise-keeping voice and software provider of the industry, contact center technical issues, downtime, and poor customer experience are now a thing of the past. In an industry ruled by uncertainty, Nobel Biz combines balanced pricing with the highest quality, topped off with outstanding support. But above all, Nobel Biz delivers peace of mind to contact center managers and owners. And for the first time, James hit that sweet spot of focus and confidence that is allowing him to take his business to new heights of profitability and success. After all, you know what they say, promises are the uniquely human way of ordering the future. Nobel Biz, the promise keepers of the industry.
Is there any uniformity or uniqueness that comes with troubleshooting? One of the things that always comes through is when there's a problem and the agent's saying, I can't hear the customer, or they can't hear me, or it's one-way audio, or whatever it is. There's all these points from the system, the computer, the headset, the software on the back end, the telecom network, the carrier. I mean, you can go through all kinds of lists of things that can create that experience that's negative for the agent and, of course, the customer. But when it comes to troubleshooting, especially in that remote environment, is it uniform across the board where if it's a problem, you're going to just go through the whole thing? Or is there a way to be able to go in and say, yeah, maybe it's a headset issue. Maybe it's the way the headset's talking to the system. Any insight or, common things that people run into when it comes to stuff like that?
When we started putting telemetry in our devices, we really started partnering up with the single pane of glass providers out there, because we knew that people were managing multiple stacks in order to find that. What's going on with my laptop, my Wi-Fi, what's going on with my cloud and my ISP and my network, my firewalls, all that. Those are all different places to manage and lose audio path. What's going on with my SBC, right? So we really teamed up with people that would see us and put us on the same pane of glass, so that people could tell. And there are ways to tell. And we do team up with those folks. And I mentioned some of their names before, like Nectar and Operata and Versailles and ServiceNow, folks like that. But even if anybody who's in a managed services or MSP kind of capacity or in a GSI capacity out there would like to take data from our devices and include it into their own dashboards, because that's how they look at it, we have the flexibility to do that and create that single point of view.
Yeah, I mean, I think the moment that you can reduce all the time spent on troubleshooting stuff
Right,
one by one and look at it as an ecosystem that's interconnected, you're going to make a better experience for everybody on board, and not only obviously
right.
spare the
It could
time
save
and resources.
it could save 20 minutes trying to find the fact that I'm talking to you like the video is off in the troubleshooting process. You could be asking a half hour's worth of question before. Now we can tell you with certain headsets that the boom was here, right? That's how sophisticated some of our telemetry can be. That the boom was up by my eye versus down by my
Who would
mouth.
have thought user error could ever affect anything?
We say it again. I use this a lot in that many of these contact centers are literally Lamborghinis and Ferraris in the way that they're designed. They've got every AI thing that they're looking at deploying, and it funnels down to a possible single point of failure that could be the headset. And so many people design that Lamborghini of a contact center and let any headset on the bottom of that, or and I likened it to a tire, right? If you're gonna design a Lamborghini, don't put a flat spare tire on that thing that you can't see is not going to perform for you. You need a really good tire with TPMS so you can see if it's working for you. And that's kind of what the headset is these days. It's that where the rubber meets the road. Can I see it on a dashboard? Is it working for me for my contact center to perform?
So yeah, I mean, Vern, when it comes to the research from Jabra, talking about autonomy and flexibility, those have really been critical retention tools in the contact center. So how have people been able to balance the autonomy while also still maintaining the performance and accountability across teams?
I think it's going to depend on the tools that are involved here, and that's one of the things that we see um, as us being influential towards. So, when you allow people to work from home, it's really hard to get them back in. Um, you can't make up for that time of which you're transporting your kid to school and things like that, right? There's just no price you can put on that. And so being able to find a balance is something that we think that the tools are going to be able to do, provide. So from our standpoint, we take a look at the devices in terms of how can we let our devices give you the data to use other tools for agent assist and things like that to be able to help when the supervisor can't come around. Is the data from me good enough for your bots to hear that to supply that information? I also look at how do our tools, we do sentiment analysis, right? Um, we have real-time widgets that show kind of, is the agent engaged in the conversation? Um, are they feeling a little flat because they just woke up, and does their voice sound like this? A bot's not necessarily going to pick up this kind of tone of voice that I'm sounding really boring right now. And so if we can kind of sense things like empathy in tone of voice, no matter what the language, then we can give supervisors a feel of that and even gamify that, right? Your tone of voice is really good. Let's badge you for that and let's talk about that. Or you're getting yelled at by a customer. Let's let your supervisor know real time that you're getting yelled at. Um, and actually, if you de-escalate that, let's see that in the tone as well. Because if you de-escalate that, well, shoot, I'll pay you more to handle the angry chats, right? So there's all sorts of ways that you can use things like tone and data from a contact center to kind of manage that, so that that agent can feel autonomous, where I can work in the office if I want, or I can work at home if I want, but it's up to me. That's what's really going to keep people around at a job to me, because people have a choice, right? In terms of where they want to work.
Yeah, I mean, empowering people and giving them the tool sets for success is going to be a big help for them to be able to feel wherever they're at and what they're doing, to feel accomplishment, to feel like they're actually meeting the expectations, hopefully them being set. And, with expectations being a big thing, let's kind of shift a little bit to, Gen Z. Gen Z is really entering the workforce when it comes to contact centers. Specifically, let's kind of look at that expectation, right? Where do the expectations differ? And some of these expectations really are around flexibility. We
Yep.
understand is one of the important ones, and also well-being. So, how are you seeing in this in particular generational shift this influencing the future design of how workspaces and technology are really done in the industry?
Talking about the agents, we were all there at one point, Christian. We were all Gen Zers. I don't care what you call them. We were all younger in our career. And when we're younger in our career, we have a lot to offer and we have a lot to learn as well, right? But what we did was, as Jabra, we do studies every year, and one of them was strictly on Gen Z, and we found out that Gen Z is going to work-life balance their way to the top. That's something that we've seen, partly because many of us as adults and their parents have shown them that we can be flexible, that we can show up to their games and all that kind of stuff. So why wouldn't they want that as well? So they're trying to find a way to kind of imitate what we did. Um, the other thing that we see is that Gen Z is going to build their resume by going from job to job because they have the capability to do that. Um, Not just because, and this is for the knowledge worker, of course, not just because they have the technology to do it, but because it's very possible for even an agent to call up a bunch of friends and say, "Let's go all work in Costa Rica this month. I'll be an agent. You do your job. You do your job." And I feel like the companies that are flexible enough to do that within confidentiality, of information, I think people that can offer that flexibility, to Gen Z, is something valuable in the future. There's going to be a lot of van lifers. There's going to be a lot of people moving around that want that flexible, I want to travel kind of lifestyle, and I think that that's all there for them. But at the same time, as much as I talk about the mobility of Gen Z, I also think that, just like we did when we were younger, we met a lot of our friends at the workplace as well, right? Even some of our spouses, right? So Gen Z also is the generation that wants to go in to the office as well, to be able to work on upward career advancement, or even just have that workspace or meet friends and be social. So if you take into account the hybrid way of working along with working in brick and mortar that Gen Z wants, if you give them flexibility to come in and a reason to come in, um, and build around that so that other generations can kind of work around that too. Because people our age now, we there's a fear of missing out still, right? Of wanting to be in the office to catch all that energy. I think if we build our offices like that or our call centers like that, there's a lot of flexibility to work and work. So, but it will take some technology to do that for, as you're saying, Christian, for accountability and things like that. So,
Well, regardless of the industry, it still feels like from the beginning of our conversation, we're in the people business, right?
Right.
And knowing your internal customer just as well as or better, your external customer will let you hopefully, right, design a business, design an environment, whether it's the remote or the hybrid or the in-person brick and mortar, with all the things that one would need to be not only successful, but to think of those single points of failure or those areas that get often overlooked, whatever it may be in the business. And so with that, when companies don't do that, or in general, maybe certain industries like the one we're talking about, attrition is huge, right?
Yeah.
Attrition is costly in many ways, and it's a tough challenge for many in certain types of verticals, especially in the contact center space. So from your work with CX leaders, what kind of strategies are you seeing that are really proving effective in addressing this and keeping the agents motivated? So we talked a little bit about the agents' experience with the headsets, the experience with flexibility in Gen Zs, and then being able to have the upward mobility and a career opportunity to have an environment with people that they meet, and who knows, maybe their next spouse. Anything else that's out there that you're seeing around that area?
I think retention has a lot to do with what the job looks like today and what it can look like tomorrow. When I've spoken to agents themselves, they themselves don't want to deal with a lot of the repetitive stuff as well, right? So I think that there's a welcoming element to some of the AI that's going to be out there that really filters out that part of the job that is either route or not as fun, right? But that leaves a more complex job, and I know that that's something that's probably said quite a bit on your podcast here. And to me, the way that I picture that environment that person is working in, I picture them as like Maverick and Top Gun in a cockpit, right? Just managing all this technology, and managing all this CX customer journey stuff from an application standpoint. And what does that person really need? They need the right tools, right? And for us, being the actual device, the wearable, right, that you actually put on your body, we pay attention to that. Um, and one of the things that I've seen, just as a side note here, is I've done business in a lot of different countries, and you have an agent here that kind of fell into being an agent, right? But when I've traveled to other places like the Philippines, right, um, a lot of those agents get paid more than some other people in the country, and many of those agents are 21 to 29 years old. you know so you get the best and the brightest agents in those kinds of contact centers, which is a completely different concept sometimes to think about, right? But I've seen where our headset is such an important thing, where you go through your training in a contact center over in the Philippines, and I've seen this on even like YouTube podcasts and stuff. Our headset, or a headset, becomes like a diploma after you get that training, right? Like, I've made it to that job, and I've earned that headset, and I can now make more money than some of my friends in my country, right? So I think that there's something to that if we look at other countries and how some of the agents view their jobs, and we bring that over here, how do we make the agent position feel like that, right? It's about the tools, right? Whether it be software based, whether it be the headset itself, because getting the right headset actually does make a difference, as you know. Um, Getting a really good one versus getting a really cheap one makes a difference in how you do your job. Like, I've seen agents sit under their desk trying to take a call because it's so loud around them, or there's so much noise. Um, Trying to improve their life there to make their life better is something that we always get involved with, right? And I think one more analogy that I'll use is that I likened it to carpenters, right? If I'm a carpenter, I'm going to spend $15,000 on the best saws and hammers and just workbenches and all that kind of stuff. It's not much to spend to get a great headset in comparison for an agent who this is what they do 8 to 10 hours a day, right? So I think investing in technology is a thing that we really need to look at the people that take care of um, other people in our businesses.
Yeah, and talking about the people, right? There's always been this discussion since the advent of AI being looked at as it's real, it's here, it's going to take over the industry, and agents are now going to all be replaced. Um, But when we look at that and we say, what do people want first right now? And it seems like from the research that Jabra is doing is saying, customers still overwhelmingly prefer human
Yeah.
voice when it comes to these complex interactions. And so with that being said, how are you envisioning the AI complementing the humans, empowering them versus, eroding that personal connection for those types of complex interaction?
We've been thinking about that a lot lately, and I want to attack that question by focusing on what humans can bring that AI cannot bring, right? Like AI can make some of the easy things easier, or the hard things easier, like the route things easier. But what AI cannot do is bring an advocate for you as an agent, right? And what I mean is let's take care of that, man. I really feel like I can see that that's a problem, and I can really relate to that type of thing. That's very hard for AI to genuinely do, right? That's something that only a human can do, right? And so we want to free up the human to be that to um, to a customer. And I also look at it this way too, is that think of all the AI that's happening outside of the contact center. You have LinkedIn campaigns, outreach campaigns, you have social media campaigns, all that kind of stuff that are designed to bring people together to talk to people. Put tech support in there too. And the moment two people talk together, you really don't want to screw that up after all that investment, because that's a lot of AI investment on the front end, not just on the back end, right? So I think what we need to do is really focus on the tools that allow the job to be easier for them. Take the pressure off of that. Take that absolute kind of and figure out what the right metrics are to relook at our metrics when it comes to contact centers. Is it really all about FCR? Is it really all about CSAT? Or is it really about how we sound in addition to, and how we say things versus what we're saying, right? So I think that looking at those things will allow the job to change itself to focus on. To me, empathy will be a differentiator in the future, and so will the use of video, right? Because you and I are the kind of people that use video because we handle complex things, we have complex conversations, right? In the future, when AI takes all the easy stuff, it's going to leave video as a differentiator for the contact center agent. And I truly believe that that's going to be part of the cockpit of the future. And this is going to be a high value agent, left to handle human problems. So to me, it's going to hopefully make the job better, you know, and actually
Yeah,
be leave the agent to be. I'll finish that thought. It'll make the job a little bit better, and it'll also allow them to hopefully feel more fulfilled with the job and having helping tools in their cockpit.
yeah, I'm always thinking about that thought of what is your career, right? What is your ability to have upward mobility, both financially, of course, to support things you want to do outside of the work, but the meaningfulness of purpose at work, right? And being able to sit there and say, is my only skill set increase going from an agent to a supervisor to a manager, or the different divisions of the supporting groups for the center when we're talking about within the contact center. But you're talking about this world in which the stuff that a lot of agents really don't want to do
Right.
anyways gets offloaded for the time being, right? Until who knows what AI can do in the future, which we'll talk about in a minute. But there's this moment where upskilling, giving tool sets for these more complex conversations, to have these agents now be able to be empowered to do a lot more, to have access to stuff that makes their job easier and allows them to potentially address these more difficult, emotional, complex conversations in a better way, which sounds like a win-win if deployed properly. With
Yeah.
that being said, where do you see AI and the use of AI going forward, though? Are you seeing anything coming around the corner that is going to be a game changer, or is it more of people just need to adopt better or know why they're adopting all the stuff they're doing right now that may be just a shiny object?
I think that we're just at the tip of the iceberg with it. I think there's some great agentic AI kind of ideas out there. There's some great NLP technologies out there. You can't even tell if it's a person half the time. You have live translation happening. These are all things that are definitely going to help out. I do think, especially at the tier one, tier two level in some cases. But that tier three, tier four level, where it becomes more complex, and maybe we do have to dip into knowledge bases, and we do have to rely on bots to dip in there to provide that agent assist. I think all those are going to be super useful, right? I think the key is going to be how do we train our people around that, and what kind of personality fits for that, right? For that kind of, and I'll say this too, is that I mentioned at the very beginning, one of the other business lines that we have is in gaming. We make the SteelSeries headsets, and I look at that population of folks. Many of them are professionals, many of them are professional gamers, or people just game. They're sitting in a cockpit with tons of tools, gamifying how they achieve success and what they do, and they're using headsets and devices and cameras and things like that. And I really take a look at what the agent is going to become in the future. To me, they're going to be a gaming helper, right? Where they're surrounded by tools, AI based or not, to be able to do the job of helping people. So I think that my vision of where we're going is just of a place with so many tools, many of them undefined, customer journey tools, CX tools. I mean, what kind of person is going to handle that at the hub of all that, right? I almost feel like we have to focus on the human beings and training them to get there, more so because they're going to have to sift through all this data that we throw at them with our cannons of data, right? So I think that let's not leave the person behind. Let's train them on how to deal with all that because they're going to be getting nailed from data all over the place. And even for me, the way that I do my job here at home being a hybrid worker, I feel like I'm just like I am playing a game. I'm just like bam, 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 bam. Every half hour, every 15 minutes, there's 100 emails going out. I think I think there's the capacity for people to use AI is something that we have to question, right? We also have to question how do people benefit from AI in terms of personal balance too? It's like, will it free up time, or are we just going to fill it with work, right? I think those questions have to be asked as well. So uh, AI brings up so many different things to talk about, Christian. It's tough,
We could have a whole episode
really.
just on that.
So
But considering time, and I know we'll have a great discussion on that topic at a later time because we can talk AI forever, and I know every
yeah,
day it's going to morph and change. Let's kind of shift a little bit to the personal side, right? I know you don't work all the time, even though you probably say you work all the time, right? There's got to be something that you're doing when you're not completely immersed in work, right? Things that you love to geek out on, hobbies, passion projects, who knows, guilty pleasures. What are you doing when you're not immersed in work?
so when you're in this business of sound, there's a lot of musicians in the business of sound, and I'm a musician too. So it's out there on YouTube. You can probably Google my name and find me playing Hawaiian music somewhere. So I play slack key Hawaiian guitar on the side, and I played at restaurants and anniversaries and parties and stuff like that. So I do like to do that. There's a big sound music element to my life. I am married. My wife works for Jabra as well. So this is kind of a Jabra house. It's interesting. We can't stop talking about work. We have the same SKUs in our head, which is scary. Um, I do have four kids. I've got one in Portland, one in Hawaii, one in Long Beach, and one at home. They're 30, 26, 26, and 24. So I'm kind of at that point in my life where, how do I fill that gap? And I bought an RV and I travel around quite a bit in my RV. And I
Nice.
actually work out of my RV. I am a hybrid worker, testing out the properties and capabilities of my devices. And I travel for a living as much as possible and go see the world because we're part of the technology that built it. So I'm gonna damn well use it and expect my kids to use it too and benefit from this as well. So those are kind of my side things. I love to bowl. I love to shoot a bow and arrow. I mean, we can go deep into my interests here, but it's not just
It's
all
funny.
headsets.
Well, it's funny you mentioned RV because I'll tell you right now, for anyone who's ever owned an RV or regularly used an RV, there's got to be so many funny stories of you figuring out how to use it, how what things you need to buy for it, what ends up not working when it's supposed to. So I'm sure we could always catch up on some fun stories on
Yeah,
that. But you mentioned at the end travel, right? And
yeah.
international travel has been a big part of your career and personal life. But because you've been able to do a lot of that travel and experience a lot of different cultures, has there been any moments during that travel that have kind of reshaped how you think or view business and maybe even just leadership in life?
Yeah, so when I was a global account manager, and even now, that's taken me to countries like Thailand and Spain and London, or England, Ireland and China, Philippines, India, all kinds of places, Costa Rica, Puerto Rico, all kinds of places, especially with call centers, right?
Hmm.
And for me, being a mobile worker, yeah, we could do this over Zoom or whatever it might be, but having that personal connection and actually talking about personal things is really kind of what I live for now these days because it just enriches business life, right? And to me, I love having conversation for like 45 minutes and 15 minutes of it having been about business, right? Because the concept of business around the world, from what I see, is a lot about trust, and trust is built in person, even though we can have a lot of this online. So I find it enriching to travel. Um, I would rather see the smallest thing in a country than the biggest tourist attraction, right? Um, if I were to equate that here in the U.S., I would love to see why you love your cornfields in Iowa, right? I'm the same way in the Philippines. Show me the rice paddies. Show me something real about where you live. And I think that that tells me a lot about the people and about the customers involved that you service, right? When you take a look at the cultures around the world. So I do find it very enriching.
Well, it's always great to hear the stories of how everybody in the world still has some common themes, right? You know,
Yeah.
trust is a common theme, having things that are important to them locally, their family, their friends, their career aspirations, whatever it may be. But with that, you had to have learned moments over time where you can look back and say, if I had a conversation with my younger self back when I was
Right.
starting out in this space, is there anything that comes to mind that's either unconventional advice or just something you'd say, hey, this is what I tell myself to navigate this better or differently?
Yeah, I'd say there's two things. And this is something I live by, and there's also something that I tell my kids. Find a way to always play is something that I live by, and I tell my kids because when you're playing, you're doing well, and chances are you know, you're having fun, and you're probably making decent money having fun, right? Um, and I always say, always be learning how to love, because those are the things that sometimes are a challenge to do and to find in every decision that you make. So those are two lessons that I kind of live by. Find a way to always play and always learn how to love. And then I've spoken a lot about the Philippines, a little bit in this because I'm, Filipino Hawaiian in terms of ethnicity and culture. And I remember, working in the cubes, popping my head up out of the cubes back in the day when we were there, and it looked like a bunch of rice paddies, you know, just in the fields in the Philippines, and in where my family is from and stuff. And I'm even heir to a rice paddy in the Philippines. Have no idea what I'm doing with it, but grow stuff. But I remember coming back to work out of thinking, and popping my head out of the cube, said, "This cube is my rice paddy," right? And I think that's important for me to remember to keep me grounded, um, in terms of my work, and keep me close to the earth. So, and I've taught my kids that as well. Wherever you go, make that be your rice paddy, right? Work it, make it produce for you and your family, and keep close to the people, keep close to the earth. So I think those are some of the things that I kind of hold dear to myself in terms of why I wake up every morning.
It's awesome to have purpose, and it's great to hear yours. And so, Vern, I hate to say that we've run out of time, and I look forward to our future conversations. But what a great conversation today! And I know there's going to be people from the audience who are going to say, "I want to connect with Vern. I want to know more about what he's doing. How do they go about doing that?
You can find me on LinkedIn, Vern Fernandez. There's not many of us out there on LinkedIn, so it's easy to find. I'm also at vfernandez at jabra.com. If there's anything that you want to talk about in terms of CX agents, your career, or anything like that, I'm always down for that conversation because I'm interested.
Fantastic, Vern. Thanks so much for joining today. And obviously, for those of you that were listening, appreciate you joining in as well. But don't forget to subscribe, share, leave us a review. It helps us to be able to get more listeners and a better experience out to everybody. So we appreciate everyone's feedback and the like. So we'll be back next month. We'll do another deep dive into the lives and lessons of the CX space and contact center industry. So thanks for tuning in to First Contact Stories of the Call Center.